My name is Teri, and at 34 years old, I run a multi-million-dollar tech company that I built from scratch. But to my family, I have always been just the forgotten daughter. When my brother Kyle invited me to his wedding after 15 years of distance, I thought it might finally be a chance to heal old wounds. I had no idea it would become the day I would burn bridges and rebuild my life. If you want to know how I went from sitting at the kitchen table to bringing down a family empire, stick around. Before I begin my story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself when nobody else will. Growing up in my household was like constantly walking on eggshells. My parents were the kind of people who set impossibly high standards, then acted disappointed when you inevitably fell short. They ran a small manufacturing business that had been modestly successful in our hometown. Nothing spectacular, but enough to provide us with a comfortable middle-class lifestyle in suburban Illinois. From the very beginning, there was a clear divide in how my brother Kyle and I were treated. 4 years younger than me, Kyle was the golden child. The son my father had always wanted to take over the family business someday. Meanwhile, I was expected to be perfect but never celebrated. I got straight as through high school started a small web design business at 16, and even won a state business competition my senior year. Yet at dinner, the conversation always circled back to Kyle's average achievements and his bright future. Kyle scored the winning touchdown at the game today. My father would beam, completely ignoring the fact that I had just been accepted to 3 colleges with scholarships. My mother was no better. "Teri, could you help Kyle with his math homework? And make sure the dishes are done before you start your own schoolwork?" By 18, I had had enough. The day after graduation, I packed my bags and left with $800 in savings. I still remember my mother's parting words, "You will be back when you fail. Family is all you have." I moved to Chicago, worked 3 jobs while taking night classes at a community college, and eventually landed an entry-level position at a small tech startup. Those first years were brutal. Some nights I could barely afford ramen noodles, and my apartment was the size of a shoebox with questionable heating. But it was mine, and for the first time I was free from the constant comparison and disappointment. For 15 years I kept my distance. Holiday calls were brief and superficial. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, but always found reasons not to visit. Too busy with work became my standard excuse, and it was not entirely a lie. In those 15 years, I transformed from the forgotten daughter to a force to be reckoned with in the tech industry. My startup journey began when I identified a gap in supply chain management software for small businesses. With a loan and 2 dedicated partners, I launched Teri Tech Solutions. The first 3 years were touch and go, but by year 5, we had a solid client base and 20 employees. Year 7 brought our breakthrough product, a cloud-based inventory system that attracted attention from major retailers. By year 10, we had expanded to 200 employees across 3 offices. Now our company is valued at over $200 million with clients in 14 countries and offices on 3 continents. Meanwhile, Kyle never left our hometown. He went to the local state college, dropped out after 2 years, and started working for our parents. He never developed any ambition beyond eventually inheriting the family business. From what little I gathered during our infrequent calls, the company had remained stagnant, neither growing nor innovating in a rapidly changing marketplace. So when the wedding invitation arrived in my mailbox, I was surprised. Kyle was marrying Vanessa, the daughter of Harold James, owner of James Tech Industries, a mid-sized company specializing in industrial machinery parts. I had heard of them in passing as they supplied components to some of my clients. The invitation was elaborate with gold embossing and premium cardstock, clearly announcing that this was a union of wealth and status, at least on the bride's side. I called Kyle to congratulate him, our first real conversation in years. "Thanks, Teri," he said, sounding genuinely happy. "It would really mean a lot if you could come. Mom and Dad are excited to see you too." I doubted that last part, but something in his voice made me pause. There was a hint of desperation, a subtle plea that made me wonder what was really going on. "I will try my best," I said noncommittally. A week later, my mother called something that happened perhaps once a year. Teri, you really should attend your brother's wedding. Family should be together for important occasions. The fact that she had never made similar efforts for any of my important milestones was not lost on me, but I bit my tongue. I am considering it, I replied. Good. The James family is very prominent in the business community. It would be nice to have our whole family present. There it was. The real reason for the sudden interest in my attendance. It was about appearances. After much consideration, I decided to go. Perhaps time had softened the old wounds. Maybe this could be a fresh start, a chance to rebuild the family connections I had lost. Part of me even hoped that my success might finally earn me the respect I had always craved from my parents. At 34, I was still seeking their approval, a realization that both annoyed and saddened me. Little did I know that accepting that invitation would lead to the most dramatic family confrontation of my life. One that would forever change the dynamics of our relationship, and ultimately reshape the future of both our families' businesses. The flight from Chicago to my hometown felt like traveling back in time. As the plane descended over the familiar landscape, memories flooded back, not all of them pleasant. I had booked a room at the best hotel in town rather than staying with my parents, a decision that already caused friction when I informed them. It is ridiculous to waste money on a hotel when you have a perfectly good room at home, my mother had said over the phone. I will be working remotely part of the time, I explained, though the truth was, I needed neutral territory, a place to retreat to when family tensions inevitably arose. My rental car pulled into my parents' driveway the afternoon before the rehearsal dinner. The house looked smaller than I remembered, but otherwise unchanged, like a time capsule of my childhood. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her eyes quickly scanning my appearance. I was wearing a simple but expensive pantsuit, my concession to the business calls I had scheduled for later. You look thin, she said instead of hello. Not I missed you, or it is good to see you. Just an evaluation as always. My father emerged from his study older and grayer, but with the same stern expression I remembered. So the big city girl finally remembers where she came from, he said, his attempt at humor falling flat. Kyle appeared last, looking nervous, but genuinely happy to see me. He had gained weight since I last saw him, and his hairline had receded, making him look older than 30. Teri, you actually came, he gave me an awkward hug. Vanessa is at her final dress fitting, but you will meet her at dinner tonight. The conversation over coffee was strained, focused primarily on superficial topics like the weather and wedding preparations. Then inevitably, the questions about my business began. So how is that computer thing of yours going? My father asked, as if I ran a small hobby shop rather than a multi-million-dollar company. Very well, I replied, simply not wanting to brag but not willing to diminish my achievements either. Teri is being modest, Kyle interjected. Her company is doing amazingly. Did you know she was featured in Business Weekly last month? I shot him a grateful look, surprised by his awareness of my success. That is nice, my mother said dismissively. But is it fulfilling? Working all those hours instead of having a family? And there it was, the judgment I had expected. Before I could respond, Kyle changed the subject to the rehearsal dinner, explaining that Harold James had insisted on hosting it at the country club. That evening, I met Vanessa for the first time. She was conventionally beautiful with perfect blonde hair, an expensive dress, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She kissed my cheeks and looked me up and down with a barely concealed assessment. So, you are Kyle's mysterious sister. We were beginning to think you might be a family myth. Her laugh was practiced and hollow. Business keeps me busy, I replied neutrally. Oh, I know all about busy women. My mother serves on the boards of 3 charities, she said, as if that were somehow comparable to running a global company. As the dinner progressed, I observed the dynamics at play. Harold James, Vanessa's father, was a loud, domineering man who clearly enjoyed being the center of attention. He spoke often about his company's successes and future plans, occasionally throwing questions at my father that seemed designed to highlight the disparity in their business success. So, Robert, how many employees do you have these days? He boomed across the table. 15, my father answered, a hint of defensiveness in his voice. 15. Well, we just expanded to our third facility. Over 200 people on payroll now. I noticed my parents and Kyle exchanging glances, something unspoken passing between them. It was the first sign that something more was happening beneath the surface. Later that night, I overheard Vanessa speaking to her mother near the restrooms. She is nothing like I expected, Vanessa was saying. From the way Kyle talked about his big-shot sister, I thought she would be more impressive. Well, appearances can be deceiving, her mother replied. Harold looked into her company. It is successful enough, but nowhere near James Tech's league. Still, the connection might be useful. I slipped away before they noticed me, their words confirming my suspicions that there was more to my invitation than family reconciliation. The following day, while Kyle was busy with groomsmen activities, I met with an old high school friend, Lisa, for coffee. She had stayed in our hometown and now worked as an accountant for several local businesses. I cannot believe you are actually here for the wedding, she said. Everyone is talking about it. Is that so unusual? Well, given everything that has happened with your family's company, people are surprised you would want to be associated with it. I frowned. What do you mean? Lisa looked uncomfortable, realizing she had said too much. I probably should not say anything, but as their accountant, I have seen the books. Your parents' company has been struggling for years. They have lost major clients to overseas competitors, and their equipment is outdated. They have been taking loans just to make payroll. This was news to me. In our infrequent conversations, my parents had always maintained that the business was doing fine. Not thriving, but stable. And Kyle, how is he involved? Lisa sighed. Kyle has been trying to save things, but he lacks experience. The wedding to Vanessa, well, people are saying it is more of a business merger than a love match. The James family has the capital your parents desperately need. The pieces were starting to fall into place. My brother's desperate plea for me to attend my parents' sudden interest in my presence. The way Harold James seemed to be evaluating our entire family. I was being paraded as the successful daughter to add value to the merger. That evening, I excused myself early from the family gathering and returned to my hotel. A quick internet search confirmed what Lisa had told me. My parents' company had filed for extensions on their tax payments, had a lien placed against their property, and their business credit rating had plummeted. Further digging revealed something even more interesting. James Tech Industries was one of the companies bidding on a major contract with Vertex Corp., one of my biggest clients. A contract that, coincidentally, I had significant influence over due to my close relationship with Vertex Corp's CEO. The next morning, the day before the wedding, I received an email from my assistant about the Vertex Corp contract. They were seeking my final approval on the vendor selection. James Tech was on the shortlist along with 2 other competitors. The contract was worth approximately $10 million, a game changer for a company of James Tech's size. Everything suddenly made crystal clear sense. This was not about family reconciliation. This was about using me for business connections. The realization left a bitter taste in my mouth, but I decided to wait and observe to see how far they would take this charade. The wedding day arrived with picture-perfect weather sunshine streaming through scattered clouds. The ceremony was to be held at 3 p.m. at the town's most prestigious venue, followed by a reception at the Grand Hotel Ballroom. I spent the morning preparing in my hotel room, choosing a deep blue designer dress that was elegant without being flashy. I wanted to look successful, but not like I was trying to outshine the bride, though part of me suspected that Vanessa would find a way to take offense regardless. The church was decorated lavishly with white roses and gold accents. I estimated the floral arrangements alone must have cost thousands. As I entered, a young usher with a clipboard approached me. Your name, please? Teri Wilson. He scanned his list with a frown. I do not see you on the main guest list. Let me check the extended family section. After an awkward moment, he directed me to a seat near the back, far from where immediate family would normally sit. I chose not to make a scene and took my assigned place, noting that distant cousins we barely knew were seated closer to the front. The ceremony itself was elaborate but impersonal, with readings that sounded more like business mission statements than expressions of love. Kyle looked nervous throughout, glancing occasionally at Harold James rather than at his bride. Vanessa performed her role perfectly, a princess bride in her designer gown, but her eyes held a calculated coolness that made me wonder if Lisa had been right about the nature of this union. After the ceremony, guests were directed to the hotel for the reception. I mingled briefly during the cocktail hour, reconnecting with a few relatives and family friends who seemed genuinely surprised to see me. "Teri, my goodness, you look wonderful," my Aunt Judith exclaimed. "We hear you have become quite the success story." "I have been fortunate," I replied modestly. "Your parents must be so proud," she continued, though we both knew that was unlikely. As the cocktail hour wound down, guests began moving toward the ballroom for the reception dinner. I followed the crowd, looking for the seating chart to find my table assignment. A young woman with an earpiece, clearly part of the wedding staff, approached me. "Miss Wilson, if you will follow me, please." Assuming she was leading me to my table, I followed her through the ballroom. We passed table after table of elegantly dressed guests, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandeliers above. But instead of stopping at one of these tables, the woman continued toward a service door at the back of the room. "There must be some mistake," I said, stopping short of the door. "No mistake, ma'am. Your seating is through here." She pushed open the door to reveal the hotel kitchen, busy with staff preparing dinner service. In the corner was a small table set for one, clearly an afterthought. "This cannot be right," I said, feeling my face flush with embarrassment and anger. "These are my instructions, ma'am. If you have concerns, you would need to speak with the bride or groom." I stood there for a moment, stunned by the blatant insult. Then, gathering my composure, I turned and walked back into the ballroom, determined to find my parents or Kyle for an explanation. I spotted them at the head table, already seated with Vanessa and her parents. Keeping my expression neutral, I approached the table. "Excuse me," I said quietly, not wanting to create a scene. "There seems to be a misunderstanding about my seating arrangement." Vanessa looked up with a cold smile. "No misunderstanding. We have limited space at the family tables." I glanced around at the half-empty table. There seems to be plenty of room. My mother shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. My father became suddenly interested in straightening his silverware. The seating plan was carefully arranged. Vanessa continued, her voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to hear. "Important business associates needed to be accommodated." "I see," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "And where exactly am I seated?" Harold James cleared his throat. "My daughter arranged for you to have a private space away from the noise. Very thoughtful considering your busy schedule." "In the kitchen," I stated flatly. A flicker of discomfort crossed Kyle's face, but he quickly looked down at his plate. "Really, Teri," my mother finally spoke. "There is no need to make a fuss." Vanessa's smile turned to a sneer. "She does not run anything here. Let her eat with the staff." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. My parents said nothing, their silence a familiar betrayal. Kyle looked pained but remained quiet, his cowardice confirming everything I needed to know. At that moment, Harold James leaned forward with a conspiratorial smile. "Perhaps after dinner we could discuss that Vertex Corp contract. Kyle mentioned you have some influence there. Family helping family, right?" And there it was laid bare. The real reason for my invitation, the strategic placement of the successful daughter at the kitchen table until her business connections were needed. I felt a strange calm settle over me, clarity replacing the hurt and anger. Without a word, I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, a note of worry in her voice. I held up one finger as I dialed, my eyes never leaving Vanessa's face. "Marcus, this is Teri. Regarding the Vertex Corp vendor selection, I need you to cancel the contract consideration for James Tech Industries." "Yes, immediately. Their business practices do not align with our company values." I ended the call and looked directly at Harold James. "That was my CFO. You just lost a $10 million opportunity." The table fell silent. Kyle froze his fork suspended midway to his mouth. My mother turned pale, her hand clutching at her pearl necklace. Harold James's face flushed an alarming shade of red. But it was Vanessa who had the most dramatic reaction, literally stopping mid-breath, her eyes widening in shock. "You cannot do that," Harold finally sputtered. "I just did," I replied calmly. "And before you think about damaging my reputation in retaliation, you should know that I have copies of emails between Kyle and your company discussing how to use my business connections without my knowledge." Kyle's head snapped up. "How did you—" "Your work email password is still your birth date followed by baseball, just like it was in high school. You really should be more security conscious, especially when planning to use your sister." I stood up, smoothing my dress. "Congratulations on your wedding. I wish you both exactly the happiness you deserve." With that, I turned and walked away from the table, feeling dozens of eyes on me. As I passed through the ballroom, a server approached with a champagne tray. I recognized her as Sarah, a former employee of my parents' company. "Miss Wilson, I overheard what happened. I just wanted to say they treated me the same way when I worked for them. They fired me last year when I asked for maternity leave." I stopped, truly looking at her for the first time. Sarah Evans, right? "You were in accounting." She nodded, surprised, I remembered. "Would you like to leave with me? I could use some company for dinner, and I would love to hear about your qualifications." Sarah glanced nervously at her supervisor, then back at me. A slow smile spread across her face as she set down the champagne tray and removed her serving apron. "I believe I would," she said. Together, we walked out of the Grand Hotel, leaving behind the chaos erupting at the head table. My phone began ringing almost immediately, Kyle's name flashing on the screen. I silenced it without answering. "Where should we go?" Sarah asked as we reached the parking lot. "Anywhere but here," I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years. By the time Sarah and I reached my rental car, my phone had rung 6 more times, 3 calls from Kyle and 3 from my father. I silenced each one without answering. Text messages began flooding in next, all variations of panic and anger. From Kyle, "What have you done? Call me immediately." From my father, "This is completely unacceptable behavior. You are ruining your brother's wedding." From my mother, "Please reconsider. Family comes first." I showed the messages to Sarah, who was seated beside me in the passenger seat. "They only remember you are family when they need something from you," she observed quietly. "Exactly," I replied, starting the car. "Have you had dinner? I am starving, and apparently I will not be enjoying the wedding feast." We drove to Antonio's, a small Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town where I used to celebrate special occasions during high school. The owner, Antonio himself, recognized me immediately, despite the years that had passed. "Teri Wilson. What a wonderful surprise." He embraced me warmly. "I read about you in Business Weekly. So proud to say I knew you when—" He seated us at his best table and insisted on bringing us his special reserve wine. As we settled in, I finally allowed myself to process what had just happened. "I cannot believe I did that," I said, half laughing, half in shock. 15 years of avoiding confrontation, and I just blew up my entire family relationship in 5 minutes. Sarah smiled sympathetically. "If it helps, they deserved it. The way they treated you was inexcusable." "Tell me about what happened with you and my parents' company," I said, genuinely curious. Sarah sighed. "I worked there for 6 years. When I became pregnant last year, I requested the 12 weeks of unpaid leave I was legally entitled to. Your father called me into his office and told me they could not afford to hold my position. When I mentioned the Family Medical Leave Act, he suggested I should be grateful they had employed me at all." "That sounds exactly like him," I said, anger rising again. "What have you been doing since then?" "Odd jobs mostly. Serving at events like tonight, some bookkeeping for small businesses. The job market here is not great, especially for a single mother." "Do you have your resume updated? My company is actually opening a small satellite office in Chicago next month. We could use someone with accounting experience. Sarah's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely. It is not charity, to be clear. I need good people, and anyone who survived working for my father for 6 years has proven they have tenacity. As we enjoyed our meal, I gave Sarah my business card and promised to have HR contact her on Monday. Meanwhile, my phone continued to buzz with notifications. I finally turned it off, completely deciding to deal with the fallout in the morning. After dinner, I dropped Sarah at her apartment and returned to my hotel. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted Kyle leaning against my parents' car, clearly waiting for me. For a moment, I considered driving away, but I knew the confrontation was inevitable. 15 missed calls, he said as I approached. Could you not have answered just one? I had nothing to say to any of you, I replied coldly. You humiliated us in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what you have done? I believe I stopped being used by my family. Something I should have done years ago. Kyle ran his hands through his hair in frustration. This is not just about you, Teri. That contract was everything. Dad's company is on the verge of bankruptcy. The merger with James Tech through my marriage to Vanessa was our last hope. So, you admit it was a business arrangement, not a love match. He had the decency to look ashamed. It was both. I do care for Vanessa, but yes, the timing was influenced by the business situation. And inviting me was part of the business plan, too. It was not a question. Harold found out about your connection to Vertex Corp. He made it clear that having you at the wedding showing family unity would help seal the deal. Kyle's voice grew quiet. I am sorry, Teri. I should have told you the truth. Yes, you should have, I agreed. Instead, you let them seat me in the kitchen like an embarrassing relative you needed to hide. That was Vanessa's idea. I swear I did not know until it was happening. I should have stood up for you. But you did not. You never do, Kyle. You have spent your entire life letting Mom and Dad shield you from consequences while I fought for every scrap of recognition. He looked down at his feet. I know. I have always known how unfairly they treated you. I just never had the courage to say anything. And now your courage would have cost me $10 million in business connections siphoned away without my knowledge or consent. Is there any way you will reconsider the contract, I mean? The wedding is already ruined, but the business could still be saved. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw the desperate man he had become. Part of me felt sorry for him, but a larger part recognized that this was a pattern that needed to be broken. No, Kyle, I will not reconsider. What happens to the business now is not my responsibility. It never was, despite how much Mom and Dad tried to make me feel guilty for leaving. What about family loyalty? He asked weakly. Loyalty goes both ways. When was the last time any of you showed loyalty to me? My accomplishments, my struggles, my life has been nothing but an afterthought to this family. Until you needed something from me. Kyle had no response to that. We stood in silence for a moment before he spoke again. Vanessa is threatening to call off the wedding. Her father is furious. He says you have damaged his company's reputation. Harold James damaged his own reputation by trying to manipulate business connections through a family wedding. As for Vanessa, if she truly loves you, she will marry you regardless of business considerations. Kyle laughed bitterly. We both know that is not going to happen. I shrugged. Then perhaps you have dodged a bullet. Easy for you to say. You have your successful company, your life in Chicago. What do I have? A failed business, probably no wife and parents who will blame me for everything falling apart. For the first time, I felt a genuine connection with my brother. He was finally seeing the family dynamics, clearly experiencing what I had felt for years. You have a chance to start fresh, Kyle. To build something that is truly yours, not what Mom and Dad planned for you. It is terrifying but also liberating. Trust me, I know. He looked uncertain, caught between the familiar dysfunction and the unknown future. I should go, he finally said. They are waiting for me at the hotel. Good luck, I offered, meaning it sincerely. As he walked away, he paused and turned back. For what it is worth, I am proud of what you have accomplished, Teri. I always have been. It was the first genuine compliment I had received from a family member in as long as I could remember. I nodded in acknowledgement, not trusting myself to speak. That night, I called the airline and changed my flight, opting to return to Chicago the next morning, rather than staying the planned 3 days. Whatever happened next with my family, I needed time and space to process it from the safety of my own territory. The Monday after the wedding, I was back in my office in downtown Chicago, trying to focus on work despite the emotional turmoil of the weekend. My assistant Marcus had been briefed on the situation with the Vertex Corp contract and had handled the immediate fallout professionally. The contract is being reassigned to Alvarez Manufacturing, he informed me during our morning meeting. They were our second choice anyway, and their terms are actually slightly more favorable. And James Tech's reaction, I asked. Multiple calls and emails growing increasingly desperate. Their legal team made some vague threats about interfering with business relationships, but our counsel says they have no grounds. I nodded, relieved that at least the professional side of the situation was under control. Any other fallout I should be aware of? Marcus hesitated. There are some rumors circulating in the industry about what happened at the wedding. Nothing concrete, but people are talking. Let them talk, I replied with more confidence than I felt. The truth will stand on its own. In reality, I was concerned about potential damage to my reputation. Business was often built on relationships, and public family drama could be perceived as unprofessional. However, I also knew that I had built enough credibility over the years to weather this storm. My phone had been relatively quiet since I had blocked my parents' and Kyle's numbers the night before. But around noon, an email arrived from Kyle sent to my work address. Teri, I hope this reaches you. The wedding has been postponed indefinitely. Vanessa left the hotel last night and is not answering my calls. Her father has withdrawn all offers of financial support or partnership. Dad is meeting with bankruptcy lawyers today. Mom is not speaking to anyone. I do not blame you for any of this. I blame myself for not standing up sooner, both for you and for what I really wanted. I am thinking about moving away, starting fresh somewhere. If you are willing to talk someday, I would appreciate your advice. Kyle. I read the email twice, unsure how to feel. There was no satisfaction in my family's suffering despite the justice of it. Yet I also knew that sometimes systems needed to collapse completely before they could be rebuilt in healthier ways. I decided not to respond immediately, giving both Kyle and myself time to process. Instead, I focused on work, including reaching out to Sarah Evans as I had promised. By Wednesday, she had a formal job offer from our HR department for a position in our new Chicago satellite office, with a salary that was twice what my parents had paid her and relocation assistance. I cannot thank you enough, she said when she called to accept the position. This is life-changing for me and my daughter. You earned it, I assured her. And selfishly, I am glad to have someone in the office who understands my background. By Thursday, the industry rumors Marcus had mentioned were beginning to die down, replaced by news that James Tech Industries was scaling back operations and laying off staff. I felt a twinge of guilt for the innocent employees affected, but reminded myself that Harold James's business practices were the real cause, not my actions. That evening, a formal letter arrived at my home address, obviously having been courier delivered rather than trusted to regular mail. It was from my parents, written on my father's business stationery, the letterhead, a sad reminder of better days for the company. Teri, we are writing to formally apologize for the events at Kyle's wedding. Our behavior was inexcusable, as was our tacit approval of how you were treated. We have spent the days since in serious reflection about our failures as parents, particularly toward you. The business will likely not survive this setback, which has forced us to confront how much we have prioritized it over family relationships, especially our relationship with you. We do not expect forgiveness, nor are we asking for financial assistance. We simply wanted to acknowledge our wrongdoing and express our deep regret. If you are ever willing to speak with us again, we would be grateful for the opportunity. With love and remorse, Mom and Dad. The letter shook me more than I expected. In 34 years, I had never received an apology from either of my parents, let alone an acknowledgement of their failures. Part of me suspected the disaster of losing both the wedding alliance and the contract had simply forced them into humility, but another part hoped the experience had genuinely opened their eyes. I placed the letter in my desk drawer, not yet ready to respond, but unwilling to throw it away. Time would tell whether their remorse was genuine or simply a reaction to crisis. The following week, I received another email from Kyle. He had accepted a job offer in Denver, a complete change from the family business working for a renewable energy startup. The irony is not lost on me that I am following in your footsteps, striking out on my own, he wrote. It is terrifying and exciting all at once. Vanessa has officially broken off our engagement, which hurts less than I expected. I think I was in love with the idea of saving the family business more than I was in love with her. Thank you for forcing me to see what I could not see on my own. This time, I did respond, wishing him well and offering to be a sounding board if he needed one as he navigated his new path. Meanwhile, Sarah had relocated to Chicago and was excelling in her new role. We occasionally had lunch together, and I found myself sharing more about my family history than I had with anyone else. There was something therapeutic about speaking openly with someone who had witnessed the dynamics firsthand. Have you thought about getting professional help? She asked during one of these lunches. Not that you need it, but talking to someone objective might help process everything. It was a good suggestion and one I had considered before but always dismissed as unnecessary. Now, with the recent upheaval, it seemed like the right time. I found a therapist specializing in family trauma and began weekly sessions slowly unpacking the years of conditional love and unrealistic expectations that had shaped my sense of self-worth. As the weeks turned into months, the immediate crisis faded into a new normal. My company continued to thrive, expanding into new markets and developing innovative products. The Vertex Corp contract with Alvarez Manufacturing proved successful, validating our decision to go with them over James Tech. And slowly, tentatively, communication with my family resumed. First with Kyle, who seemed genuinely committed to creating a new life for himself in Denver. Then occasionally with my mother, brief, awkward phone calls that gradually became more natural. My father was the last to reach out, his pride, the hardest to overcome. But eventually, he too made contact, his voice gruff but sincere, when he asked how I was doing. None of us mentioned the possibility of me helping with their financial situation, and I appreciated that boundary. This was not about money or business. It was about slowly rebuilding trust that had been broken long before the wedding incident. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, I found myself at a crossroads. The family company had indeed filed for bankruptcy, with the assets being sold off to cover debts. My parents were adjusting to retirement earlier than planned, living modestly but manageably on their savings. Kyle was thriving in his new job, having found a passion for sustainable energy that he had never discovered in the family business. And I was left wondering what role, if any, I wanted my family to play in my life going forward. The hurt had not disappeared, but it had evolved into something more complex, interwoven with understanding, and even a measure of forgiveness, not for their sake, but for my own peace of mind. 1 year after the wedding incident, I made a decision that surprised even me. Teri Tech Solutions was expanding again, and we needed a new manufacturing partner for our hardware components. After careful consideration, I decided to establish this facility in my hometown, bringing much-needed jobs to the community that had shaped me for better or worse. The announcement made local headlines. Hometown success story brings high-tech jobs to community. The property I purchased was ironically the former site of James Tech Industries, which had downsized dramatically after losing the Vertex Corp contract and several others that followed. During the planning phase, I found myself back in my hometown more frequently than I had been in 15 years. Each visit became less painful than the last, the ghosts of my past gradually losing their power to hurt me. On one such trip, I ran into Harold James at a local restaurant. He had aged visibly in the past year, his once imposing presence diminished by business setbacks. "Miss Wilson," he acknowledged stiffly. Mr. James the First replied with a nod. He hesitated, then spoke again. I suppose congratulations are in order for your company's expansion. Thank you. Another pause. I want you to know that I harbor no ill will about what happened. Business is business after all. It was as close to an apology as a man like Harold James would ever come. I accepted it with a simple nod, neither of us having any desire to prolong the interaction. Later that day, I visited my parents at their new home, a modest condominium they had downsized to after selling the family house to cover business debts. These visits had become regular, but were still somewhat strained, each of us learning how to relate to one another as adults, without the business as the centerpiece of our relationship. We saw the announcement about the new facility, my mother said as she served coffee. It will be good for the town. That is the hope, I replied. We should create about 150 jobs initially, with potential for more as we grow. My father cleared his throat. Will you be needing experienced management? I could put together a proposal. My mother shot him a warning glance and he quickly backtracked. Just an offer. No pressure. I appreciated that he caught himself showing progress in respecting the boundaries I had established. Thank you, but we have our team in place. However, I would value your insight on local suppliers if you are willing to share your knowledge. The relief on his face was evident. I was offering him a way to contribute his expertise without crossing into the complex territory of direct employment or financial entanglement. It was a small olive branch, and he recognized it as such. I would be happy to help with that, he said, his voice gruff but sincere. Meanwhile, Kyle had settled well into his new life in Denver. He had been promoted twice at the renewable energy company and was dating a fellow engineer who shared his newfound passion for sustainability. We spoke regularly now, our conversations no longer shadowed by family expectations or comparisons. I never knew what I was missing, he told me during one of our video calls. All those years thinking I had to take over the family business, I never considered what I actually wanted to do. Better late than never, I replied, genuinely happy for him. Vanessa got married, by the way, he added casually. To Colin Richardson. You remember him. His family owns those car dealerships across the state. I did remember Colin, another scion of a local business family. How do you feel about that? Kyle shrugged. Honestly, relieved. She found someone who fits into the role I was trying to play. And I found someone who likes me for who I actually am. The manufacturing facility broke ground in spring, and I made sure to hire locally wherever possible. Among the first hires were several former employees of both my parents' company and James Tech Industries, people with valuable skills who had been casualties of the business fallout. During this period, I also established the Wilson Foundation, focusing on scholarships for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds pursuing careers in business and technology. The Foundation's first initiative was a mentorship program partnering experienced businesswomen with high school girls interested in entrepreneurship. My therapist suggested that this was a way of giving others the support I had lacked, transforming my painful experiences into something positive. She was probably right, though. I also recognized the genuine business benefit of developing diverse talent in our industry. As the facility neared completion, I was approached by several business organizations to speak about my journey and success. Initially reluctant, I eventually agreed to share my story at a women's leadership conference, omitting the more personal details of the wedding incident, but speaking candidly about the challenges I had faced as a woman in the tech industry. The response was overwhelming. Dozens of women approached me afterward, sharing similar experiences of being undervalued or overlooked. I realized that my story, while unique in its specifics, reflected broader patterns that resonated with many. This led to more speaking engagements, and eventually to the publication of a memoir focused on business resilience and authentic leadership. The book, titled Building Beyond Boundaries, became a bestseller in the business category, further expanding my platform and influence. Throughout this period of professional growth, I also experienced personal development. Through therapy and self-reflection, I came to understand that my drive for success had been partly motivated by a desire to prove my worth to my family. With that recognition came the freedom to define success on my own terms, to build a life that fulfilled me, rather than one designed to earn approval I might never receive. Part of that personal growth included opening myself to new relationships. I had always prioritized work over my personal life, using the demands of building a company as an excuse to avoid vulnerability. Now I found myself cautiously dating again, eventually meeting Jackson Reynolds, a widowed architect, with a thoughtful manner and quiet confidence that put me at ease. Jackson had his own successful firm and understood the demands of entrepreneurship. More importantly, he had done his own emotional work after losing his wife to cancer 5 years earlier. We moved slowly, both appreciating the value of building a solid foundation. By the time the manufacturing facility opened 18 months after the wedding incident, my life had transformed in ways I could never have predicted. My company was stronger than ever, expanding into new markets and pioneering innovative technologies. My relationship with my family, while still complicated, had evolved into something more honest and mutually respectful. And personally, I had found a balance that had eluded me for years, making time for relationships, self-care, and interests beyond work. The grand opening of the facility was attended by local officials, business leaders, and media. My parents were there, standing somewhat awkwardly at the periphery, until I specifically acknowledged them in my speech, thanking them for instilling in me the work ethic that had contributed to my success. It was a generous interpretation of our history, but one that allowed us all to save face publicly, while acknowledging the truth privately. Kyle flew in from Denver for the event, bringing his girlfriend Jessica, who impressed me with her intelligence and genuine warmth. Watching him confidently networking with industry leaders completely himself, rather than trying to fit a predetermined role, I felt a surge of pride in the man he had become. As I cut the ribbon on the new facility surrounded by employees, family, and community members, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. The painful wedding day that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, the catalyst for healing and growth that might never have happened otherwise. 2 years after the wedding, that never was, I hosted a dinner party at my Chicago penthouse. Around the table sat an unlikely gathering: my parents Kyle, and his now fiancée Jessica Sarah, and her daughter Jackson, and a few close friends who had supported me throughout my journey. The atmosphere was relaxed, with conversation flowing easily and laughter punctuating the evening. My mother, who had once criticized my lack of domestic skills, genuinely complimented the meal I had prepared. My father engaged Jackson in a discussion about sustainable architecture, without once trying to dominate the conversation or prove his superior knowledge. Kyle and Jessica shared their plans for a small, intimate wedding in the Colorado mountains, deliberately different from the elaborate society event that had been planned with Vanessa. "No assigned seating," Kyle joked, catching my eye with a meaningful look. "Everyone sits wherever they want." It was the first time any of us had directly referenced the wedding incident in a social setting, a sign of how far we had come in processing the experience. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, my father unexpectedly raised his glass in a toast. "To Teri," he said, his voice uncharacteristically emotional, "who had the courage to stand up for herself when none of us did, and who has shown more grace and victory than we deserved." The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. It was not a detailed apology or an accounting of past wrongs, but it was sincere. And at this point in our journey, sincerity meant more than elaboration. Later that evening, after most guests had departed, I found myself alone with Kyle on the balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had just gone along with it all?" he asked. "Eaton in the kitchen helped with the contract, played the role they wanted." I considered the question carefully. "I would have preserved the appearance of family harmony," I replied. "The business merger would have proceeded. You would have married Vanessa. Mom and Dad would have salvaged the company, at least temporarily. And you would have continued being used and undervalued," Kyle added. "Yes, and eventually I would have grown resentful and withdrawn even further. The family would have remained dysfunctional, just with a prettier facade." Kyle nodded. "I have been thinking a lot about that day, how shocking it was to see you finally say no. It was like watching someone break a spell. Suddenly, I could see the manipulation that had been happening all along. It took me longer than it should have," I admitted. 34 years of trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Better late than never, he said, echoing my own words to him months before. Inside, I could see my parents chatting comfortably with Jackson, my mother actually laughing at something he said. They were different people, now humbled by failure, and forced to re-examine their values and behaviors. The loss of the business had been painful, but ultimately liberating for them as well, freeing them from the endless pursuit of success at all costs. Sarah had become not just an employee, but a friend, her accounting skills helping to make the new manufacturing facility a model of efficiency. Her daughter was thriving in Chicago, benefiting from better schools and opportunities than had been available in our hometown. As for me, the journey had taught me lessons I never expected to learn at this stage of my life. First, that standing up for yourself is not selfish, but necessary not just for your own well-being, but for the health of all your relationships. My years of silence and accommodation had enabled dysfunctional patterns that hurt everyone involved. Second, that true family is defined by mutual respect and support, not by blood relation or obligation. The family I had built around me now, a blend of biological relatives and chosen connections, was stronger and more authentic than what I had known before. Third, that success measured only in financial terms or external validation is hollow. Real success includes personal peace, healthy relationships, and the knowledge that you have lived according to your values. And perhaps most importantly, that forgiveness does not mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. It means freeing yourself from the burden of resentment while maintaining healthy boundaries. My relationship with my parents would never be perfect, but it was now honest with clear expectations and mutual respect. Jackson joined us on the balcony, slipping his arm around my waist. 6 months earlier, he had proposed, and we were planning our own wedding for the following spring. It would be a small ceremony focusing on celebration, rather than spectacle, with everyone who mattered to us seated together at one table. "Everything okay out here?" he asked, sensing the emotional undercurrent of our conversation. "Just reflecting on the journey," I replied, leaning into his solid presence. "A pretty remarkable one," he observed. "Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did that day." "I wish I could say it was courage," I admitted. But honestly, it was simply that I had nothing left to lose. They had already taken my dignity. "And look what you built from that moment," Kyle said. "A stronger company, a foundation helping young women, a more honest relationship with family, and a life that is truly yours." As we stood together looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of completion. The painful wedding day had been not an ending but a beginning. The catalyst for authentic living that might never have happened otherwise. The path had not been easy. There had been legal threats from Harold James that never materialized, awkward family gatherings, as we learned to relate to each other authentically, and plenty of my own internal struggles, as I unlearned patterns of seeking approval and validation. But standing there with my brother and my fiancé, with my imperfect but evolving family inside, I knew with certainty that walking out of that wedding was the best decision I had ever made. Not because it punished those who had hurt me, but because it finally set me free to create the life and relationships I truly deserved. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and self-respect? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most important growth. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about standing up for yourself and building healthy relationships. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to set boundaries even with family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you deserve a seat at the table, not in the kitchen.